Welcome to the Wise Yourself Up podcast. I'm your host, Carla McGreevy, and today we have a very, very special guest, Maria Rafferty, who's more widely known as the Hormone Health Coach. Maria is a fertility expert, hormone expert, and Chinese medicine practitioner. So thank you so much for coming today. So delighted that we finally get to do this.
Thank you for inviting me, and it's been on the cards for a long time, but it was just finding a date that suited us both.
And it was actually the podcast first birthday on this date. Now this won't go out until probably like the second week of December or so, or around that. So this has been recorded around the 16th of November, which is the birthday.
Happy birthday, Carla.
Yeah, so you're the birthday guest. You're the birthday guest. So just for anyone who's new to Maria, the kind of work that you do acupuncture, you work with women's fertility, and you work with period issues and different things one-on-one and in group settings, isn't that correct?
Yeah, so Chinese medicine is what I do predominantly, and with the cases I see, it's generally Chinese herbal medicine that they need. I also have trained in my abdominal massage, which is where I got all my womb work. I'm very much about the womb. And then the periods were an extension of that. Realistically, with the people coming in, people come in the door to me with fertility or hormone, whatever, and 9 times out of 10, we start with digestion. That's a big part of everybody's problems.
So it's the poor digestion that's affecting the womb and the ovaries.
Well, if you look at the digestive system, so Chinese medicine, which I love, it's 3,000 years old, and it was based on observations. So they use a lot of analogies, and because they were trying to explain things, they didn't understand really what was going on inside the body. So they equate the lungs to the mountains because they're the closest to heaven.
Okay.
And they do the air exchange. So they thought of this as the mountains. Then the digestive system, which is the middle Dao, as it's called in Chinese medicine, upper, middle, lower. The middle one was the farm. That's where all the hard work was done.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what feeds every other system. And if there's not a good harvest in the farm, the whole village is going to suffer. And then the pelvic bowl, the pelvic area was like the drainage system. So all the waste from the farm went down to the drains and was let go from the body.
Oh, so
and that really helps people understand. And so we've got so much energy, or we should have so much energy, so much fire, so much heat. We need that fire. You've often heard of digestive fire. The digestive system needs to be warm in order to extract the nutrients from the food and then distribute it the whole way around the body.
Yeah, so that's the same as yoga, and Maria's also a yoga teacher.
That's right, but more therapy. And yin.
Fire is very much associated with that area, with digestion.
Yeah.
So we're going to do it in 4 parts today. So we're sort of going to do it in a sequence of events of what way we come across these issues, right? So first is our periods come along. Then usually we want to have sex and contraception comes into play. And then usually in the stages of life, fertility, then if people want to have babies, and then menopause. And that's what way we're going to run through it today. And then we're going to finish off with some questions that I got sent through on Instagram. So periods. Let's talk about periods. So, interestingly, you remember the exact date of your first period. Yeah. That is insane.
18th of October 1989. It's not really, it's my brother's birthday. And that's why I remember.
And how old were you?
I was second year. So I was 12 and I was going to be 13 in January. So I was almost 13.
Okay. And was it celebrated?
No. Remember, this was the 80s, and I'm an only girl. I've no other sisters, but my mum, in fairness to her, had made sure. I remember I was still at primary school, and she had told me all about it, and she had bought me a book, and she was of that generation that had her first period and saw the blood and thought, what's happening to me?
Yeah.
So she just made up her mind. She's like, that's not going to happen to my daughter. So I was very lucky. I had the book, I had a bit of a chat, and then we went to, there was a thing on in the primary school for the girls in P7, and parents were allowed to go to it. Well, mums were allowed to go to it, and my mum went, and my friend, I'm still really good friends with her, her mum went, and that was the only 2 mums that went.
It's crazy, because that sounds advanced for me, because I was in the 90s growing up, and when I had my first period I was 14, and I was so full of shame. Like, I didn't tell anybody. Like, I'd never told anybody.
Did you not?
No. It was like I was so filled with shame, and I
Were
don't know
you?
why.
Were you looking forward to getting your period?
No, fucking wasn't.
Oh, I
Excuse my
was.
language. No, like I remember reading about sex, right? When you get sex education, and I was like, "There's absolutely no way I'm not happening to me." Right? I remember being horrified at the idea of sex. And I remember learning about periods and about pubic hair, and I was like, "There's no way I'm going to get pubic hair." You know, like not really. It just
Yeah.
felt so beyond probably the innocence of what I felt at the time. And I never wanted boobs or anything. No, I was just no. I wasn't excited by it.
Like
No.
I'm going back a long time, but so I don't know about all the other stuff, but I remember as a group of friends, and I definitely remember it was still P7. Of course, we didn't have our periods then, and like we were just discussing them in school or being learning about them, and we were like, just couldn't wait for them.
Oh really?
Maybe I shouldn't speak on behalf of others, but I remember there was an excitement in the air.
But I know some girls were like that. Like I remember working with women, some women have told me that like they were delighted. I would say the majority shared my experience of having shame. In my experience of working with women.
Maybe I've blocked it out.
No. I mean like other women. Like I think like a lot of people feel like in my granny and granda brought me up, but like there was no bin in our bathroom. It was like periods weren't allowed to exist. And you didn't dare leave a tampon or a pad about.
Do you know? I wouldn't have left anything about, and I would have been the up the sleeve person as well. And like I know when I was at school, I wouldn't have wanted anybody to know that I was on my period, kind of thing at the start anyway. But I don't remember dreading it or having feelings of shame or anything around it.
I don't know, but I don't even know where it came from. It was just like I just would never have told my granny or my mummy, and I just wanted to hide it.
I knew I had to hide it and keep it private and that, but there was no shame.
Yeah.
But how interesting that you were 14 when you got your first period, because that's the age you're supposed to get your first period at.
Is it?
Because, Carla, I'm going to introduce you. This is so important for the rest of the conversation. I'm going to introduce you to the 7 cycles of Jin, which is, in Chinese medicine, a woman has 7 cycles of 7 years.
Okay.
So, the first stage is 0 to 7, and that's childhood.
Okay.
We all know that when a girl is 7, her hair becomes longer and thicker.
Does it? I never knew this.
But ask, right? No, they do, and they get their teeth.
Okay.
So there's a slight change in maturity levels there. Yeah, we're going to find out later that all these 7-year cycles have kind of blurred. They're not as distinctive as what they used to be.
Because that
years
matches
ago.
Psychology and it matches chakras also.
Yeah, 7 sacraments, 7 deadly sins,
Yeah.
7 wonders of the world, 7 colours of the rainbow. There's 7. Everything was a big name, and it used to be the age they made their communion at as well. And then you made your confirmation at 14. So the next stage then is 14, and that was when you became a maiden, a young maiden, and that was the onset of your first bleed.
Okay, so I was right on the button.
You were, Carla. But what has happened, obviously the world has changed. We've got electricity and we're not as in sync with nature as we used to be. And there's obviously a lot of benefits to that. I'm kind of glad we live in houses and have sanitation and things. I don't mind syncing with the moon or anything if that's what sanitation means and electricity. And then the next stage is 21.
Yeah, and what happens then?
Well, 21, this is when we're supposed to be like around the time we're having our children. And that's so you've 21, you've got, they've merged together, so 21 to 35, that would be the strong motherhood era.
And what's that called?
Motherhood.
Oh, is it? I thought there was another.
No, so you go from the child to maiden to motherhood. There's really only maiden, mother and crone. They're the 3 big.
Because I've heard of
the 3 big
them,
names.
3 archetypes, but I thought maybe there was another word.
No, there's not. So that's a very spiritual way of looking at it, and the Maya massage would have been all into that. But basically in the Chinese medicine, they're looking at the energy of the kidney.
Okay.
So we're not born with it in full vibrancy. Well, it doesn't come into full force, until we're 14 and we have our first bleed. And then when it starts to kind of go down a bit, it would be at 35.
The kidneys vibrancy?
The kidney energy, I know it's really complicated. I've just thrown it in there, the kidney. So kidney, you've got kidney yin and yang and all of this. So your kidney energy is the seat of reproduction.
Okay.
So it is the energetic organ in Chinese medicine that is responsible for reproduction and periods and all of that. And it's why you want to preserve that energy as long as possible and don't burn it out.
Why do women, well, I'm speaking for myself here, riddled with kidney infections through my 20s?
Okay, so that is completely different because that's more on the physical and more on the Western point of view. But you're riddled, there's infections can be, that's urogenital biome we'd be more getting into. But this is just your standard, how the energy of the woman's body
works,
ebbs and flows and ebbs again towards her life, or throughout her life. So then, and it's interesting because people will start to say, and at 35, anybody that's over the age of 35, you just don't get away with things the way you used to. And it's interesting now that they're saying perimenopause starts around that age.
Do you think it does?
I think it's going to be different for everybody. Perimenopause it's a rite of passage towards menopause. We're all going to go through it. Knowing what I know about hormones and the way we support hormones in Chinese medicine, the first hormone, which is the queen of hormones, which I can't say the full proper technical name, but it's DHEA, that does start to dip in your early 30s, but you would not notice it. It's so subtle.
Okay.
And it is the hormone that is responsible for the production of estrogen and testosterone. It is a steroid-based hormone. It is produced in the adrenals, which the adrenals are right on top of the kidneys.
Yeah.
So that could be where the connection's coming from with the kidney energy. And it would contribute to heart health, bone health, your ability to burn off sugar, so insulin, metabolism. Yeah, all the things that are associated with perimenopause, really.
So because that dips doesn't mean that you're perimenopausal, though. Is that right?
No, and it's meant to dip.
Yeah.
But it will dip sooner with some people, depending on how sore you've been, how much you've taxed your body, what your body has been through, or whether or not you've taken care of your body.
Yeah.
So after 35, it comes 42.
Okay.
And 42 is where people really begin to notice the difference. Your body shape will begin to change, your moods will begin to change, and you're beginning to think, why am I doing this job? Or, why am I in this relationship? Or why? And then at 49 is when you're roughly around the age you're meant to have your last bleed, and then you get the crown and you head into the prime of your life.
Yes, where you get all the wisdom.
You've got the wisdom on the way to here, but we'll come back to menopause again because I've a lot to talk about that. But we'll just go back to periods. But I just wanted to give you the 7-year cycles, and I'm sure people will be listening to this going, "Oh yeah, around 35, yeah, I did, notice slight changes. Your energy, you just don't have the same energy and stuff."
I don't know. It's hard for me because, I would say I had I lost 3 people within 18 months. So I slept a lot the past 2 years. So I don't even know what my normal is.
You see, and this is why I did say it doesn't necessarily correlate the way it did thousands of years ago, because, life is happening to us and around us all the time in a very different way than what it would have happened 100 years ago, never mind.
Yeah, and also, I don't have kids, so I can't sleep. Do you know what I mean? Like, some of my friends would be like, well, I'd be sleeping too if I didn't have kids, but they do have kids, so then they're not sleeping
But then
more.
that's why you have the high hormones in your 20s to help you through all that.
Oh, yeah, all the energy. Now, I definitely notice a difference in my energy from 20s to 30s, definitely. Yeah. You're the most fertile when you're 17.
I don't think there's just one age, and I mean, no 2 months can be the same anyway, but generally between those ages, in your late teens
to late 20s.
Yeah, to late 20s. But I mean, there's people having babies outside of those times all the time, so.
Okay. There was actually a girl who wrote in a question that her periods last in 14 days.
Yeah, that's not right. She needs medical help.
Okay.
They'll put her on the pill. Okay, can we have this discussion before periods, because it's more important than periods?
What?
Can we talk ovulation?
Okay, ovulation, let's go.
Because when I started my Instagram 2017, it was because...
That's when we first connected. We were connected from then. I was checking today. I was like, wow, it's a long time.
So what had happened was I was seeing loads of patients, and they were doing their utmost to be in good health, but they were over-exercising and they weren't eating enough, or they were eating... they weren't eating enough real food, and then they had mental health problems, and they had no periods, and they were coming to me when they had no periods. And that's when I started to go on Instagram and educate people about it. So now I think the word has got out there, and there's lots more people talking about periods, but we still have nobody talking about ovulation. And the thing is, I'm always telling people, please track your ovulation. yes, track your period, but ovulation is the key.
Yeah, because my friend, she was trying for a baby, and then it wasn't until she was testing her hormones, you know, through the pea stick thing. And then she could tell when she was ovulating, because she was just going by the standard, you know, like, say it's like day 11, you're meant to ovulate, but obviously it's different for each person. Each month it can be different, and
yes,
she
each
didn't
month
realize that.
it can be different, yeah. So what happens if a woman, or a young woman, and this is, sometimes people message me and they're going, oh, my 15-year-old daughter, and I'm like, I cannot believe that they're still doing this in 2024, but they've got some sort of gynae problem. It'll be like the pill. So, you know, I would like women to start saying, instead of going to the doctor and saying that my periods are irregular, I'd love them to say, my ovulation is irregular. And I'd like it regulated, or I've got painful periods, but I want to hold on to my ovulation. You know, and really talk about ovulation, because ovulation is the process of which we make estrogen and progesterone. And now we're hearing just how important they are, but unfortunately, it's addressed at the women at the end of their reproductive cycle. And I'm like, why do we have to wait until we're 50 years of age to hear that estrogen and progesterone are really important to us?
Yeah.
They're equally as important when you're probably maybe more important when you're 20, 25, 30, 35. And I'm happy that we're talking about menopause and we're raising awareness of it. But I'm like, no, why do women have to wait until it's all over and done with, or to the end to find out all this information or be taken care of at work? Why is it not happening, you know, at the other end of the scale?
Because basically we don't really, just because we're bleeding doesn't mean that we are producing hormones or ovulating.
That's right. And that's another thing. So those girls that had lost their periods because of the disordered eating and overexercise, they probably would have stopped ovulating months before that. But because they didn't know how to track their cycle, or they weren't watching out for fertile mucus, they did not know. If you're not ovulating, you're not going to produce your progesterone, which is that anti-anxiety.
How do you know that you are ovulating?
Well, the best way to know is to track your fertile mucus. You should only have discharge from the vagina during your period, which is blood, and then at your fertile time, which is the egg white clear mucus. And
you shouldn't have it like all month round.
No, and some people do, and then I appreciate it's harder for them to tell, but I'm like, you have got dysbiosis in your pelvic bowl. You know,
what's that?
It just means that there's
imbalance
in the bacteria and the viruses and the everything else that's in there,
which could be caused by underwear and all these different things and materials, right?
It's mostly diet.
Oh, is it? Okay.
But do you know what? Diet, what we eat, is a big part of our day-to-day life and everything, and our diets are just so full of sugar. And it's not right to pin it on one thing, because obviously we've a sedentary lifestyle.
So much blue screen.
Yeah, all the products we're putting on ourselves. And again, I understand that people are trying to normalise bodily functions and discharge and all of that, but they're somewhat normalising the abnormal.
Okay.
Do you know? So people will say to me, but I thought it was okay to have vaginal discharge every day. And I'm like, well, it's a little bit like if I was drooling from my mouth now, or if my nose was I know if my nose was constantly running, you'd be going, are you okay? Do you have a cold? Because you know it shouldn't be like that.
The vagina's trying to tell you something. The vulva, should we say the vulva?
Yeah, it'll become from the vaginal tract anyway. But so, and that's what I say to people, and you're like, oh yeah, it doesn't mean that, like, I might sneeze later, or I might need to blow my nose later, because it has cleaned something out, and that's okay. But if it's constant, you know, if it's every day, then you know that there's some sort of disruption in there. So but it is by the changes. The changes would be the biggest thing. I know people do their basal body temperature, and that's okay if you're not trying to get pregnant. But if you're trying to get pregnant, it can be an extra stressor, and it kind of
the temperature monitor,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because if I'm not on anything at the minute, but say I was getting into a relationship again and want to have unprotected sex, I thought I would get the Oura ring and go by my temperature to avoid pregnancy. Was my thinking in my head.
I just heard unprotected sex, but obviously in a secure relationship.
Yeah, that's what I said. Yeah. Like, no, I'm not into open relationships.
No, but I was just going, oh, what? Like, it's not for everybody, but if you have a really regular cycle,
and I don't, is that a bad thing?
See, can we go back to ovulation again? Oh, we're skipping and jumping. So sometimes somebody would come in to me and they would say, oh, my period is late. Or my period was 5 days late. And I'm like, okay, so how many days after you ovulated did it start? And they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, because if it was 12 to 14 days after you ovulated, your period was exactly on time and perhaps you ovulated late. So do you see the difference? And sometimes people's periods, they might think, oh, my cycle is 28 days, how perfect. But maybe they didn't ovulate until day 18 and then that's only 10 days luteal phase. Or maybe they ovulated on day 8 and that's a 20-day luteal phase. So you have to make a note of when you're ovulating, and you can't do that with an app. But you make a note of when you're ovulating and then when your period starts, and you do the maths between the two. And that is really important.
Okay, so that's where this is my new thing I'm going to start doing, is because I have been monitoring my bleed I only started paying attention to my period in my 30s, which is, I wish that wasn't the case, but it is the case. But I don't track my ovulation at all.
That's the main event. But anyway, you're not alone with that. That's with everybody. But once you learn how to do it, you can't not. It is important because your ovulation will go off before your period. And I know I'll be 50 very soon, well, in 2 years, and I never had a problem with my cycles ever.
Ever?
No, not that I really noticed.
Have you been on contraception?
Yeah, but I was very young, and wait, get this. I used to have like a little calendar that I recorded my period, which was of course every 28 days because I was on the pill. If it's only 20 or something, I didn't know. Yeah, so I've always kind of kept an eye on it, and it's never really given me any bother outside a day or two. Or if it was more, it might have been because I was on holidays or I had taken a long flight or I was sick, and I could always account for why it had been knocked off. But then at the start of this year, so I was 47, and I could see that my cycle was going off and dipping. Now I do have the Aura ring, which is it's not taking my basal body temperature, but it is taking my skin temperature.
I thought it did take the other temperature.
The basal body, no, it's only taking skin, but I can track it, and because I know how to track my fertile mucus and everything, they are aligned. Okay. So I could see by this that it was like, oh, it's going a bit off. What I have learned, the big thing that I have learned in the last 6-7 months, is massive overlap between perimenopause and trying to get pregnant, because I am now doing all of the things that I tell my fertility people to do. I am like, trying to really support my egg quality, really support my ovulation, because I want to cling on to that estrogen for as long as I can, and I want to keep producing progesterone, and I know I have to have good quality eggs and a good ovulation to help me produce that progesterone and manage my stress.
And what does that look like then for you?
For me, I had to give up sugar. Like, I wasn't eating loads of sugary food. My diet's not terrible, and I always was like that. I started being aware of health in the 90s. I was 14, and Mummy had bought me this magazine called Top Santé. It was the 90s, and I remember reading all about this and all about these health things, and things in tomatoes that were good for you, and I was fascinated. So Mummy bought me, when other girls were having fashion magazines and all of those kind of things, here I was, Mummy was buying me Top Santé every month, and that's why I can't do her makeup.
What do you mean by sugar though? Because, like, what is sugar to you? What sugar are you cutting out? Tell me.
So that was what I was going to say. My diet wasn't that bad. So what I gave up was, for a month, I give up all cheap carbs.
What's that?
To me, that was bread and crackers.
Bread.
I know, but I only did it for a month. What I noticed, because I did use a continuous glucose monitor, it was showing how my blood sugars were peaking and things like that when I would eat certain things. So I didn't really learn anything in terms of food, because I already knew what good nutrition was. But what I did notice is that the first weekend I put it on, I had like a Sunday roast dinner, and I could see my blood sugars beginning to go up. Probably
just from like the roasted veg or what?
Probably. Remember, this was the second day. I put it on a Saturday, and this was the Sunday. And then it was about 4-5 weeks later, having a Sunday dinner again, and it didn't put my blood sugars up.
So what was the difference? I
think the difference was that I'd given my pancreas a break for 4 to 5 weeks. So what I was doing, my diet wasn't terrible, but I was being at home more during the lockdowns and everything. I was nibbling. So I was constantly nibbling something.
Yeah.
And even though I might have had the dark chocolate, dark as in 60%, so not proper dark, and I was breaking little pieces off and eating it throughout the day, so my blood sugars would constantly have been elevated.
Yeah.
So basically what I'm doing now is I try to eat at the same time every day, and just 3 times a day for the most part. I'm not perfect.
And what else? So diet's one up.
Diet, I'm trying to rest more and slow down more. I am going through a gateway. I have done, just by coincidence, I didn't plan to do it, but I've had so much work done in terms of like all that emotional, spiritual. So like I've lost so much baggage in that in the last 2 years, mostly by attending training courses, and then that's what happens. And then I take herbal medicine.
Yeah.
So,
because I think rest is like, that's...
Rest is key.
Yeah.
Rest is key. It's just key, and it is how we're going to navigate perimenopause and menopause.
Yeah.
Well, once you get through the menopause, so it's for me, like I'm telling my patients, I'm like, okay, so menopause is second spring in Chinese medicine. You're vibrant, you start again, you're starting over. But what comes before spring is winter.
Yeah, it's a harsh winter.
And it's a harsh winter. And not everything's going to survive the winter, but not everything is meant to survive. Like being a yes person, we're not bringing that into the next phase of our lives.
Yeah.
The lack of boundaries, the putting yourself last all the time. That is what the motherhood phase is about, is serving other people.
Yeah, and some women have shared that with me, that their severe menopause symptoms finally made them change their behaviours.
But that's what I say to people, and I said it on a story the other night. It's like perimenopause is, if you can change the narrative. I know there's a lot of fear out there, because fear is going to sell the weight loss, the skin,
It drives me crazy, the fear around the menopause.
It is. But perimenopause it's like an opportunity to sort your shit out.
Yeah.
Before you go into the next phase of your life. And it will nudge you, it'll poke you a wee bit, and then it might nudge you, and then sometimes it's going to have to come over and shake you up and down and so on. You need to change this, you need to change that, you need to change the other. And we just have to tune in and be ahead of that if we can be. Now, obviously, because of my work, I'm very much aware that this is what happens. So I've been trying to get ahead of that. I still don't know how I will go through it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say that I'm not going to take HRT. I'm going to try to avoid it. But I would never dismiss anything like that. I might be very grateful of it someday. But I'm certainly not going to avoid doing the work, or try to pretend it's not happening, or try to resist it, or any of those things.
Yeah, because there is a correlation which me and you agree on, that the more you neglect yourself, the more stressed you are, then the more you're going to have period problems and menopause issues as well. Like, that's the first thing that you can address, and then take extra precaution or extra things that you may need to, if you are resting adequately, you are eating right and moving.
Absolutely. But that's my thing when it comes to fertility, and when it comes to contraception. I have no issue with women using the pill for contraception. It is what it is. Everybody has to make an informed choice as to what's best for them. And sometimes I work with women and it is best for them at that time, and they're like, okay, but next year I'm going to come off it. Or sometimes they're not taking it, but they're going to go traveling or something. They're like, I'm going to start it. Oh, the classic before their wedding. I'm like, oh my goodness, just take it. 2-3 months, not going to do you any harm. They don't want a period of their wedding.
Right, okay, I've never heard of that.
Yeah, so I get that a lot. Sometimes people message me going, Maria, I know the pill is so bad, but I'm getting married and and I'm like, oh, just take it for 3 months. It's not going to 2-3 months, whatever.
Yeah, because some of my friends were on it for 10 years. Like, some of my friends really regret going on it for 10 years, and some of my friends still say that they didn't notice any difference. But
this is why we can't have a one size fits all. Sometimes people come in to me and they're like, no, I never took the pill. And they're like, oh, well, I took it for 3 weeks. And they knew immediately it just wasn't for them. There's an age and a stage for everything. There's times when it is the best option for a woman, and then there's times when it's not the best option for a woman.
Yeah, because the pill, I cried my eyes out, and it wasn't very long until I came off it, and I went on the coil. I think I had the coil in for 4 or 5 years, and I loved it. But like, there's some horror stories about the coil as well.
There is, but some people are like, I just love the coil. And this is the whole beauty of, we should get to choose for ourselves. But what I want is like an informed choice. But I do have an issue with contraception being used as medicine. Where like, I've got an irregular period, oh, here's the pill.
Okay, yeah.
That will regulate it. Or you've got period pain, oh, here's the pill. That will get rid of the period pain. Instead of saying to them, well, it's just going to stop your ovulation, you're not going to have a real period, do you still want to take it?
And how would you treat a teenage girl who had really painful periods?
Well, if it's just a teenage girl, okay, so this is another important thing we need to talk about for both ends of the scale, is estrogen receptors. estrogen's not much good if you don't have the receptors. So when a girl starts her period, so say it's 11, 12, whatever it is now, her reproductive system isn't really set up. The hormones don't really know what they're doing, and it's just kind of getting itself all set up.
Okay.
So it's quite normal that the cycle would be irregular, and I would say to a mother, if she's listening, that, you know, don't worry. If mum can keep a wee sneaky track at that time, then that's okay. That's a good idea. But I would not worry in the first 2 to 3 years, because not all the estrogen receptors have been set up. But it is kind of a really big deal to not put a child on the pill at that age, because the whole hormonal menstrual cycle has to establish itself first. Sometimes I will, like, a mother will contact me and I'll be like, okay, she's very young. I don't want to be doing anything with her just yet. I can, but let's see what we can do at home. And I am like, give her a little bit of ginger in the morning to keep the warm. We have to remember, pain is caused by stagnation, whether that's emotional pain or whether it's physical pain. Something is stuck. Something is not flowing the way it should be. And the cold causes stagnation. That's why we're so avoid the cold food, cold.
I love a cold drink. Maria's looking at me. If you're not watching the video, I'm getting dirty looks here.
I mean, it has its place, but I like there are people, and 90% of their diet is cold and raw, and they're eating salads and they're having smoothies and they're having iced coffees.
I'm not. I'm just talking about like a nice drink.
But that's okay. Like, we all like something that we shouldn't like once in a while, and that's very different from somebody whose diet is predominantly
cold.
Yeah, and then you'll have, you know, they're drinking the iced coffee and they're having their smoothies. They're in their 20s, iced coffee, the smoothies, the belly tops, and then a lot of them then aren't eating very warm foods. You know, they're not eating meat or whatever, so they're very, very cold inside. And if they're not having problems already, it will catch up with them.
Do you think like a vegan diet could have that impact on a person?
It can be.
Okay.
So what I would say is, I would tell a mum, obviously, to seek medical advice, seeing as how this is going out in a podcast, and I don't know who's going to be listening to it. But to eliminate all the cold from her life and make sure she's kept warm, and even warm baths and soaking her feet in warm water. And sometimes that can be enough. I've had women in their 30s and 40s contact me saying that even taking the ginger and eliminating the cold has made a significant difference to their digestive system and their gynae. So my first assumption would be with a teenager that this could be quite simple and straightforward, and have her do those things. If there was still a problem or it persisted, then I would want to see her in clinic, because there's stagnation there, and I would be using herbal medicine to break up the stagnation.
And it could be a response to if there is problems at home as well, because if I think about myself, if I'm going through stuff emotionally, I'm having conflict in my life, or there's drama at home, especially in my teenage years, my digestion's the first to go.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know? So that would have a big impact. And I did have, and I do have irregular periods. My cycle can go from 24 days to 35.
Yeah. You should work on that.
Yeah, I think, but it's like
there's something you're doing in your lifestyle that's just not in agreement with you.
Yeah, but because of the period difference.
Yeah. Well, we'll start you off by tracking your ovulation and making sure that you are ovulating.
Well, don't be stressing me out now.
Well, you're better to know it now.
I know. I keep on saying I'm going to get my eggs tested, and then I just don't do it. It's like, just ignorance is bliss, because it's not like, I have sperm sitting waiting on me. So I'm like, just leave it.
You never know. You never know. But okay, so that's really important what you said. And I have this difference already, but there's a huge difference in the success when people are like in the throes of infertility and they come and see me, compared to the people who are like, yeah, we're only just starting, or I've got all these problems and I think I'm going to have a problem. There's a huge difference there, because it's very hard. First thing I'll say is stop trying. And then they're like, oh no, but I'm getting older, and I'm like, yeah, well, it's what you're doing is not working anyway. I'm going to have to flush your womb. I'm going to have to do this, have to go to that. I want his sperm healthier. It's 50% of the child's DNA. It might be fine. I want it much finer. I want you both in optimum health. It's going to take a few months. But then they come back and they're like, oh, it's the best month we've had, because they weren't trying to get pregnant. Because it is a roller coaster. You're like obsessing over if you're ovulating or not, and then you have shit forced sex that nobody's really enjoying, and then then you're waiting. You're like, oh, I better not have a drink. Oh, I better not run too fast because I might be pregnant. And then you're Googling, are my boobs sore? Do I feel like I'm pregnant? All of this. And then the period starts, and then it's just devastation. And then the next thing, the period's coming to an end, and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to be ovulating again soon. And it's like, oh, it's really draining for the couple and each of them as individuals. So then they don't realize that part of the reason we say to take a break is because it helps them so much mentally. And they all come back in going, oh my goodness. Sometimes I have to compromise and go, just take a break for 1 month.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay. And then they come back and they're like, yeah, we're going to take a break now until the end of the summer, because we've had the best month.
Yeah.
So,
and it's hard. It is very hard for people. I think it's complex, especially when someone's been through a lot of baby loss, and hard to navigate that, and they still want to keep on trying.
yes. But in Chinese medicine, we would treat somebody that's had a miscarriage at any stage as postnatal. It's very draining physically. And it's not given enough acknowledgement.
In terms of the impact on the female and the male.
Yeah. Well, I'm just specifically at this moment talking about the physical impact, because there's a lot of blood loss and it's very draining. And a woman should treat herself and be treated like postnatally, like with lots of rest.
But that doesn't happen in our world.
No, it doesn't even happen when they have take-home babies. Never mind. But it certainly doesn't happen. It's back, right, up, back, trying again. And then there's the whole emotional aspect of it. The grief, the devastation, the loss. I would advise taking time to work through that grief or doing what they need to do, but then they find that very difficult because they just want to have their baby and get pregnant again.
I find sometimes in a couple dynamic too, like one person can talk about it, one person can't, and I think that's very difficult to navigate. And I think it is really important for a person to talk to someone about the grief, but there's some people who are just trying to navigate it all on their own, which must be just hell for them.
This is why women are meant to heal together in groups.
Yeah.
But then we have so much shame, and the world is becoming lonelier and people are becoming more isolated. That's also impacting women going through perimenopause, is that they don't have their girl gangs the way they maybe had years ago.
Like in my granny's day?
Yeah, that's what I mean. There was so much more, people had more free time and they were more involved in their communities, more part of their communities, more cups of teas and, all of that.
Yeah, just to share for anyone who has been through baby loss, my friend lost her twins and she went to a baby loss group. Now, it was I can't remember the time period after, but it was a group and it was a mix of women. So it could have been a woman who lost her baby 20 years ago, and she just found it so healing. And so just to encourage anyone who has been through that, just to share from my friend's point of view, like how much that helped her. Because sometimes you can think, oh, it won't help and it won't make a difference, but she found that counselling and that group aspect made a massive difference to her accepting what happened, really.
And even just knowing that you're not alone, because we have a tendency to think that we're the only one, and especially with social media, because it looks like everybody else has the perfect life.
Well, especially if you don't have any friends who've been through baby loss, then you don't have anyone to have that shared experience with as well. And I think that's always important, isn't it? That someone who's been through what you've been through as well.
No, that's always really helpful.
How long should a healthy period be?
3 to 7 days, with the average being 5.
Mine's 3, so I was wondering if that's not good.
Depends how heavy it is.
It's not very heavy.
We'll talk after the show.
It's like normal. It's up. I suppose when I was a mad exerciser, so this is to share for anyone who's mad into their frigging diet and exercising, in my 20s, barely bled, was barely even 3 days, didn't even care if it came, God forgive me and pardon me. Then the coil made it heavier, and then after I got the coil out, obviously I was much more into looking after myself in actual terms of looking after myself, not just fucking shrinking myself. And now I would say, no, I would use super tampons now, which I never did before. So it must be a better flow.
Are you using tampons?
Oh, sorry.
Your period pain?
I get cramps.
Oh,
I don't get, what?
The pain.
The pain of tampons?
Yeah, you stop using them for a while and then go back. And honestly, you can't go back. Oh my God,
I use
so
the
dry.
cup. What do you use?
So oh, you use a cup?
I have used a cup before. Yeah, I need to get I must get
I use
one.
a cup, then I use a disc, I've used
a disc.
and then
I don't know what a disc
I
is.
have all these period paraphernalia at home that
I want to
bought
get
them
period
2 years ago,
pants.
and there are some things that I am like, I must show them on my Instagram sometime. Going.
Are you really against tampons, even like the natural car ones?
Well, you know what? A woman gets to decide, but it just blocks the flow. We need everything to flow freely, but for me, it's the little fibers breaking off. Like, if you ever put a tampon in a glass of water, and you'll see all the little fibers breaking off, and you're like,
I've
is
never
that happening?
tried that.
Does everybody not do that? It's just
No,
me.
not just you.
But you'll see the little fibers breaking off, and to me, it just they're very drying. They will change the pH of the vagina.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, it's just like, because I switched to a cup a long 2010, and I am like, oh no, people, I have to use one of these things.
I actually like the cup because then I could see what the blood was like.
Okay. Once you use a cup, it's like great. You can see what the blood is like, and you don't have to change as often, and you can nip to the loo, and you don't have to change it.
Yeah.
And then I was going somewhere, and whatever, I had to use tampons. I was like, how do people do these? Because you're constantly having to change them, and then they just are uncomfortable putting them in and taking them out. Whereas like the cup is so much easier.
Oh, the cup's difficult now.
Only for the first once or twice, and it depends on the cup, because the first time,
it's a job, like.
do you have a moon cup?
Yeah.
I used it once. I thought I was going to have to call somebody to get it out, and then couldn't get it out because
it's like getting your whole hands up there. It's a fucking mission.
But so then I was like, one of my best friends, she's on to me going, it's the best thing ever. No, it's so easy to get out. And I'm like, oh my God, I might have to live there forever. But what I did is then I just went on the internet, and then I got a different brand.
Okay.
So it's much softer.
What is the brand? We'll link it below in the show notes.
Lunette. No, this was a long time ago. So
okay, well we'll Google it.
There's so many more types.
I'm due my period. I'm on day 32, and I'm like a hot mama. I feel swollen. I just can't wait for it to drop, because normally it would come
such a release.
Oh yeah, and 32's long, isn't it? It's long. So I will not use a tampon. I'll friggin' get period pants. I've never tried period pants. I just don't like the thought of bleeding in them myself.
I only tried period pants for the first time in the summer.
What do you think?
Because I bought them years ago, and then I never thought to I just used to forget to use them, and also they were expensive. Now I think they were about maybe £25-30 with delivery and everything, and I'm going, well, you need more than one pair for your period, and that's far too expensive. Now I think you can get them much cheaper. So love them.
Oh really?
Love them. They're great for that day. You know, when your period kind of starts.
It's like light, yeah.
But it's and I'm like, okay, it's great that day, or it's great for, you know, the very last day.
And what else do you use then?
So I've also used the reusable pads.
I've never heard of them. It's just like pads. I hate pads.
No, I haven't used pads since I don't know when, but but they're like cloth.
Oh no, I've never heard of these.
They're not the most comfortable. And it's okay maybe in your own house or at night time or whatever, but they're very absorbable. I will give them that. But then there's a whole faff, and like, you know, you rinse it out under a cold tap and you leave it.
CBA.
Yeah. And you don't get to see what your blood's like.
That's another question. So one of my friends has extremely heavy period, like crazy heavy every month. It shouldn't be like that.
No. Do you know what? Your period should sort of be like a non-event, and people will come to me and go, oh my God, you barely notice you're having a period. You should know there is a sign the day before you start your period. You will get a little bit of fertile mucus. It's not technically fertile because you're not going to release an egg, but it's estrogenic, and then you're like, okay, my period's coming tomorrow.
But you should feel like slight cramping, low
for
energy.
half an hour. It takes about 20 to 30 minutes for that endometrial to do its thing, to break away, to let the lining break away. You should feel tired. You're going to bleed. You should feel a little bit heavier, a little bit swollen. Your womb doubles in size prior to your period. Yeah, and you should crave a little bit more sugar, and you should feel a little bit, no, I just want to sit on my sofa, and all those things are okay. What's not okay is having it for a week before, 10 days before, or 2 weeks before. Your boobs will feel fuller and a little bit more tender, but you shouldn't be suffering that for a week beforehand.
Then why do you think it feels like most people's periods aren't healthy then?
Have you seen the world we live in?
That's
we are living in a toxic soup. Even if you try to be, and this is where I have to say to people, you can't do it all right. Or if you figure it out, let me know.
Yes.
But you have to pick your battles, and you have to slowly make the changes that suit you the best, knowing that you will not be able to do it all.
There's a quote, it's hard to be well in an unwell world.
Exactly. I like that quote.
Hello, lovely listeners. If you're anything like myself, you do not want to be listening to a podcast for an hour and a half. So I've split this podcast into 2 episodes for you all, and I hope you really enjoy it. There's so much for us to all absorb in Maria's wealth of knowledge of periods, contraception, fertility, and the menopause. Please make sure you're subscribed to the podcast so that you get part 2 of this podcast, and thank you so much for listening. Take care.